Energy, central to virtually every facet of development, and yet energy poverty rates are still very high in many African countries. In Kenya, biomass constitutes an estimated 75% of the country's total energy. 90% of Kenya's rural population relies on wood fuel for its energy. Now experts warn that energy is the major contributor to climate change, accounting to an estimated 60% of total greenhouse gas emissions. With Kenya poised for an economic takeoff, the need for a comprehensive, sustainable energy strategy can no longer be ignored. The Millennium Development Goals deadline is just round the bend, and yet most people in this continent do not have access to reliable energy. In Kenya, a huge percentage of the population still has no access to electricity, resulting to unsustainable sources of energy. Hi, welcome to Project Green. I'm Esther. For Margaret in Kapenguria, every new dawn brings an unchanging cycle of daily chores, central of which is the preparation of meals for her household. To do this, she needs energy. She has no electricity in her house. Margaret walks countless kilometers nearly every day in search of firewood. She is one of about 90% of rural Kenyans who rely on wood fuel for their daily energy needs. It is estimated that only less than 20% of the national population is connected to the national electricity grid.
Sasa kuni yangu naenda tu kutafuta huko mtoni, niko na shamba kidogo huko mtoni, niko na kuni. Hata naenda kutafuta ile imekauka ama unaenda kukatakata ile mbichi, alafu nakuja kukausha. Alafu saa nyingine inapotea hata hiyo kuni, unatafuta tu pesa ununue tu kwa watu ile wanauza. Unanunua hata ya 100 ama 200 unatumia tu hivyo. Sababu hata kuni hakuna sana huko.
When these gases are released into the atmosphere, they form a kind of a blanket or a shield around you, causing elevation of temperature, and this is what we refer to as global warming.
Two schools of thought exist on the amount of greenhouse gas emissions generated by biomass, with one group terming it as carbon neutral. However, its unsustainable and inefficient use, which has in many instances led to massive environmental degradation, negates its viability as a reputable energy for Africa.
Sasa kuna wakati nikaanza kusumbukana na ugonjwa wa kifua. Nikasikia nini kama niko na homa. Na kuwa mgonjwa sasa yote naenda hospitali, alafu kufika wakati mwingine nikapimwa na daktari akaniambia uko na asthma.
In Africa, many women and children suffer the health consequences of overexposure to high levels of indoor air pollution from biomass use.
In the acuities like irritation of the mucosa, sneezing, having blocked nostrils, coughing, and if you are asthmatic, having worse and more frequent attacks. But then as we go towards the long term, you start having higher chances of contracting TB, that's tuberculosis. You start having issues with your airways, the upper and the lower respiratory tract infection, especially in children. And in the ultimate long term, you can have chronic obstructive lung diseases.
Poverty is the main driver of choice of fuel in this country. And the higher the poverty level, the higher the chances that somebody will opt for the fuel wood. There is need to have policy to cause a paradigm shift, to reduce poverty and also come up with alternative energy source. One of the clean source of energy we have is, first of all, to supply electricity to as many households as possible. And this electricity source shall be from the source, the cleaner source that we have discussed. Solar is another one.
Najua kazi ni kitu ya pesa. Hiyo ingekuwa hata njia nyingine ya kutumia. Iko ya pesa ya kununua kazi. Sio ingesaidia. Ingekuwa kama kuni yenye unatumia kuni ama hii makaa sangine. Ni vile tu ukosefu ya pesa.
The fact is, sustainable energy is critical for sustainable development. But the question is, how far along are we on the road to achieving this? Let's join Dan and his panel as they take on this and more on Green Talk next.
Over-reliance on primary sources of energy like wood and fossil fuels has led to the widespread exploitation of forests and massive pollution with adverse environmental impacts. As a start in switching to more renewable sources, how can we ensure access to cleaner energy services in our homes? Well, here to talk about this is Alice Twitter, Program Officer, Self-Help Center, and Nahashon Karaya, the Factory Manager at Help Self-Help Center. Welcome to Green Talk. As a starting point, 70% of household energy is on petroleum products. Is there a move to now people going for more clean energy sources in Kenya?
The amount of energy that we use from the wood fuel, actually not even 70%. I think recent studies show that 90% of the rural communities use wood fuel actually, either charcoal or of the firewood. Yes. And many times you realize that even the slums like Kibera, we have an example of the slums like Kibera that are able to access firewood. And 90% of the population using firewood means that deforestation is greatly, we are just destroying the forest so much to a point that deforestation is alarming even at this point. And coming to your question about how can we be able to curb this fact that we are cutting trees, and charcoal being one of the major ways in which we are deforesting our forest, we came up with a stove that is able to conserve more energy, to save more energy. That is the Kunimbili cook stove. And we use either charcoal, and we can also use firewood. And the stove is more efficient in comparison to the traditional 3-stone stove and also the kawaida jiko.
Yeah, but looking at it, it looks quite thick and it looks bigger than the normal jiko that we're used to. What's so special about the thickness and what the construction of the jiko itself?
People are coming all over looking for those jikos, and this is mainly because when you look at the amount of the load of wood fuel they use, when they're using the the Kunimbili jiko, they're using less, whereby you find a woman might use 1 load of wood fuel in a week, but using the Kunimbili jiko, in fact, the same load is going for a month and over.
When we talk about lighting, for example, the other strategies that you have that can be of use to people who who have low income or people in informal settlements, what other strategies can they adopt?
We have also come up with a strategy of minimizing the usage of the firewood as energy in terms of other low materials that those communities who are adjacent to the forest can use. For example, we have a tree known as Croton megarocarpus, and this tree produces some croton nuts, and in those croton nuts contain some oil. So the organization and Horizon Business Ventures has embarked on this project in terms of extracting that oil from those nuts, and we are using that oil as a biofuel. So we do the extraction, but still we get other players who come and buy the oil from us, the crude oil. The community can use that as an alternative energy in terms of lighting the lamps or even in cook stores.
Again, it's the acceptance of the communities towards these energy sources. For example, if you look at a study that was recently done shows that only 3% of people use solar energy in their homes, biogas 0.2%, and 0.1% for wind energy. In your own opinion, Alice, why do you think this is so, and why are these figures so low?
The initial costs are so high. So for us to try and see how can we save the forests that are being depleted,
Yes.
Even by the at household level, that's how we came up with the idea of the energy saving stove, because the stove touches every homestead. If the county, the county policy, the climate change policy is passed as law, it is indicated that people should have the energy saving stoves, and we will be able to save one of the major water towers, Mount Kenya.
Alice, as we wind up the discussion, in terms of policy, national policy, you're really talking about the climate change. What about in terms of a national policy on energy conservation and the use of green technology and renewable sources of energy? What would you like to see happen?
Well, I look forward to a time when everyone will be able to understand and know that at an individual level, they need to be conserving energy. And I would not sell this stove to people who are just in the urban centers. One of the target areas we are targeting is the rural communities, because we discover that the people who use much of the charcoal and the firewood.
I would also like to chip in and tell you that apart from the Kuni Birijiko, we also have other avenues that we are using, like the biofuel I have just mentioned. Yes. And also that will also play a great role in reduction of climate change. Right. And the byproduct that we usually get from the croton nuts and those unedible oils that we're extracting, we have turned them into products, whereby farmers now can use those products for soil fertility, that is eco-fertilizers. Okay. Yeah, and whereby those farmers can use those eco-fertilizers. When they are putting it back, it will improve the soil fertility, as well as turning now the agricultural soil into carbon sink, okay, other than being carbon source.
All right.
Yeah.
I think on that note, we will have to come to an end in our discussion today. Thank you very much for coming on to Green Talk.
Welcome.
Okay. As the energy needs grow, so has the search for renewable energy solutions. On Green Hero this week, we see how wind energy is revolutionizing Rumba Island in Homa Bay County. Catch that right after the break.
My name is Dr. Sam Dooby. I'm one of the founding directors of Access Energy here in Kenya. We started Access Energy about 2.5 years ago. Access Energy exists, as the name might suggest, to provide access to energy for those in rural areas. And we try and design ways of delivering this energy that make sense to people on the ground, that are affordable, that are safe, that are long-lasting, that are reliable. There is an enormous amount of the Kenyan population which do not have access to very simple basic services such as a regular electricity supply. 80% of Kenyans have no access to power. In rural areas, this is up to 98% of Kenyans. So this is a pattern that's repeated all over sub-Saharan Africa. Kenya is not unique in this. So that means two things. It means, one, there are a lot of people who are using very poor, expensive sources of energy, primarily kerosene, which has been linked to huge health, adverse health effects such as respiratory illness, this sort of thing, or disposable batteries, which obviously have an enormous negative environmental impact. So these people don't have a choice at the moment. They have to use these dirty, expensive forms of power. So what we're trying to do is provide cleaner, safer, more reliable modern energy services at prices which are not just affordable, but are even cheaper than they're currently paying. We focus on wind and sun. We build our own wind generators and we install solar panels also that we import ourselves. So we tend to do very specific and detailed site assessment before we go and install a microgrid. We go and assess the wind potential, and if there is good wind there, we'll install a wind turbine, because wind turbines in a good wind spot are fantastic. They are cheaper per watt than a solar panel, but obviously not everywhere is suitable for a wind turbine. So we always install solar panels alongside the wind turbines, but in some places we install only solar panels. We have installed one of these microgrids in a number of places. We have one in Rusinga Island in a village called Luanda-Rombo, and we have another on Remba Island, which is a very small place in Lake Victoria, beyond Fangano Island. So it's a place forgotten by the Kenyan services. There are thousands of people that live there, but they have access to no amenities. There's no clean water, and there's certainly no power. There's no way that KPLC or the existing system will ever get to Remba. So these people potentially would never have access to power. So we have moved in there. We are able to build a power system that exploits the abundant sun and wind on this site, generating electricity that everybody could use. Our microgrids are powered by the wind and the sun. We use wind turbines to harness the wind, and we use solar panels to harvest the sunlight. This is converted into DC power. The DC power is then fed into batteries via a controller. The batteries then store the power. So it means that you can use the power at any time of day, not just when the wind is blowing and the sun is shining. So that DC power is then passed through an inverter, and the inverter turns the power into AC power, which is what we use every day in our houses. So once the AC power has been made, we then pass it through our bit harvester distribution system. So that's what provides the monitoring. So it can tell exactly how much power everybody is using. It can also turn on and off the lines automatically if they've used up all their credit. So once it's been through the distribution, it then goes down the wires, down the lines to the people who are going to be using it. Shopkeepers, households. On Remba, there are 27 customers connected. They're not all households, some of them are businesses. We run small businesses like kinyozis, people who have a light bulb so they can stay open a little bit later, run a hotel, that sort of thing.
Mimi naitwa Hira Senyonjo. Stima ilikuwa inanisumbua juu tulikuwa tunatumia generator, zilikuwa zinaharibika sana, na saa hii tambo hii stima ikuje, naona ni tafadhali. Nikipiga hesabu ni kama kwa siku stima wanaweza nikanichaji kitu kama 30 ama 35, na hii stima inakaa hapa kwangu inakaa 24 hours. Kitambo waniwekee ijazimika. Hata customer akija siwezi nikazunguka kama wakati ule. Unajua generator yangu ilikuwa inakaa nyuma ya kinyoza hapa tu. Sasa customer akija na mfunga kwanza ndio nisipoteze fuel ile. Lakini saa hii hata akija nimekaa relaxed, naweza nikamfunge proni yangu, alafu namtengeleza, na hata saa hii naweza nikakaa nikaendelea tu na muziki yangu na kai relax nayo. Na wakati ule hata nilikuwa sina muziki. Juu hata zile zenye generator nilijaribu ilikuwa inanichomea hizo muziki. Lakini saa hii stima iko stabilized, iko standard.
Siku hizi tunauza mpaka hata saa 6. Tunaweza kuwa hii taa semeka mpaka hata ukiamua unaweza kufanya kama watu wengi, inaweza kuwa kama hata mchana. Na saa hii tunaona kama hii taa yenu ambayo umeleta hapa sasa hii siku hizi ni mzuri sana.
There are users in all sorts of other installations that we've done. For example, we have a radio station on Fangano Island, which is the next door island, which we built with a partner organization of ours. They have a solar and wind system that powers the radio station booster and also an internet booster. So they have high-speed internet on this small island in Mfangano, and a community-owned radio station, all powered by the sun and the wind. So that radio station is beamed out to thousands and thousands and thousands of people. So they're experiencing the benefits of solar and wind power, but indirectly. Ironically, it's the people in the rural areas who spend the most on their energy. Up to a third of their incomes sometimes are spent on energy, whereas people in the cities, people in Nairobi, spend much less on their energy, much smaller proportion of their income. So the people in rural areas are really suffering because they're tied to outdated source of energy, largely kerosene, but also batteries. So what we can do by building a wind and sun powered generator service in the rural areas is generate electricity locally, which means that we can bring the costs down hugely, which means that per unit of power people are saving a lot of money. It's less of a financial burden for them.
The latest WHO statistics indicate that about 4 million people die every year because of poisonous gases, because of unclean fuels. When you include other effects like the health problems that people who are exposed to these unclean fuels go through, like the women in the rural areas, children that have to spend a lot of time looking for firewood rather than concentrate on their schoolwork. This leads to a lot of school dropouts and therefore damages the level of education for the nation. Kenyans are responding very positively to the message of green energy, but more needs to be done because the adoption of clean cookstoves, for example, is still very low. The adoption of clean gas like biogas is still very low. Electricity penetration is still very low, it's around 20%, which is still very low, despite the big effort that the government is doing through rural electrification. And therefore, it's imperative that Kenyans adopt clean cooking technologies like using clean cook stoves, using briquettes, and making sure that they avoid poisonous emissions from solid biomass.
Jina langu ni Robert ama Moen. Mimi naishi Mukuru Sinai. Na mara mob ama yani kwa life yangu yote mimi sijaona nyumba yangu iko na stima. So tangu nizaliwe. And so mimi tunatumiaga tu lights hizi ndogo ndogo kama kando saa zingine, lakini mara mingi mimi hutumia ile koroboi. Mimi most of the time mimi hujiuliza kwa akili yangu, tunaweza fanyaje kijiji tupate light?
I work on a simple technology that lights houses in Korogocho. The technology is very simple. Just get the 2-liter bottle, fill it with water, add a bleaching agent, then suspend it through the roof, and it refracts in the room, producing 50 to 60 watts. Your house is lit. You can, if you have children, they can read. If you want to clean the house, you can clean. It brings happiness. Light brings happiness compared to darkness.
Now, in all this, one thing is clear. Scaling up investment in renewable and cleaner energy sources must be a priority for this country. What are your thoughts? That's it from us tonight. See you again. This hair better be looking fine, or you're in trouble.
Stoves for combustion and
This is a position that I do for the camera.
Na joke na watu wako pale nyuma. Haya, twende.